thank you so much for joining us for our Female Voices series for our 12th episode. We're really, really pleased to have you here. My name is Sim. I'm the head of content at Unlimit. Could you start us off by introducing who you are, what your career journey has been so far, and what a day in the life is like for the team leader in risk control?
Yeah. Thanks, Sim. It's a pleasure to be part of this this journey of yours as well. So my name's Nilpa, and I work for Santander, and I'm in the risk control team as a team leader. I've been with Santander 17 years, so a very long time, and I literally joined when I was in my late teens. I didn't go to university, so I went straight into banking, and I started at the bottom where I was like literally data input, and over the years and through experience I've just worked my way up, mainly in risk most of my journey, and have then been given the opportunity to become a team leader and try and make a difference where I can. Not just with the bank, but also with the people I work with.
That's amazing. That's such a long career journey in one place. So what's a day in the life like now as a team leader?
So this year's been with things evolving. Obviously, my team has to evolve as well. And part of what we've been doing this year is trying to evolve what we're doing in terms of risk controls and, you know, where we need to be looking at, especially with emerging risks, which I'm sure we'll come on to. So a day is kind of, for me at the moment, it's quite hectic. I'm doing a couple of projects on the side as well as managing the team in my BAU. So really a typical day could be a variety of things, from working on my project, team calls, helping the team, giving them direction, giving them any input that I need, and then also doing my normal BAU and managerial side of things.
That sounds really diverse and interesting. So you definitely must have really like unique days. No day is the same.
Yeah.
But no, thank you for sharing. I mean, I wanted to touch briefly. I know you mentioned the fact that you skipped university. So you essentially veered away from that really traditional route of studying in higher education, which is something that we see happening more commonly now, but maybe not at the time that you did it.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you find that pathway of just entering the working world directly? And what did you learn from that would benefit generations who are considering their options currently?
Yeah. So when I was younger, I generally struggled with studying. I wasn't great at kind of the exams and applying myself. And when it got to university, it was two choices. It was kind of like go to university, kind of, I wouldn't say waste 3 years, but it would have felt like I would have just done university for the sake of doing university. And I had an open conversation with my parents, because obviously being Indian, there is like a stigma of making sure you go to university and do what you need to do. But I had an open conversation with them. And initially it was meant to be just a gap year. I kind of said to them, look, I just want to take a gap year, do a year's work, and then figure out what I want to do in terms of university. I'd been working from the age of 16 part-time. So, you know, I've never shied away from work and stuff like that. So always worked. And I worked in retail when I first started, but with the gap year, I thought, okay, let me try and do something a bit more focused. So I thought, okay, let me try and get into the finance industry. So I worked for RBS to start off with as a cashier. I only did 9 months there. It wasn't quite what I wanted to do, but I did stick it out for 9 months. And then after that, I think once I got the kind of the grasp of the working life, I think I knew deep down that I wasn't going to go to university. So I thought, okay, the job that I want, let me try and make sure it's something I can go into and kind of develop from there. And I think I've always been one of these people that's on the job learning. Give me something to do, I will learn it, do the best I can. I didn't feel like working in certain industries you needed a degree or an education. I think a lot of it comes down to experience. And yeah, I ended up working from Santander, and as I mentioned, I started from the bottom and I worked my way up, worked quite hard. And yeah, I didn't go to university, and for me it did feel right, that it's actually felt the right thing to do, because as I've said, I've had more opportunities than I probably would have had now if I did go to university. I probably wouldn't be where I am also if I had gone to university. That would have been 3 years of being uni. So for me, it was definitely the best experience, best choice. And I think my advice to people is like, okay, if you're going to do a professional career like medicine or dentistry, etc., I appreciate, yes, you need to go to university, you need to have that education, but certain fields, some of it just comes down to experience, and it's take that bite, work, see if you can find something where even if it's just an administrative job, get your foot in the door and then just see what happens. And that's kind of what I did, and it's actually worked out really well for me. Okay, it is 17 years later, but for me, I still think I wouldn't be where I am if I had gone to university.
Absolutely. I mean, thank you for putting that together so eloquently. I think that's the great thing about seeing journeys like yours, because they teach and show us like a living case study of the fact that education is most definitely, like you said, a viable option, and essentially sometimes it's a necessity for certain career pathways. But particularly in the world of STEM and finance, there are other ways and means about it. I mean, there are so many other opportunities now with apprenticeships and schemes where people can join in. And it was really brave of you to veer away from that difference, especially at a time where going to university was the norm, essentially. And as you even touched on yourself, being an Asian woman, it's something that is inherently within our culture that we are supposed to go and study and then get a good career and then progress forward in that way. But you have a fantastic career already, so that's amazing. If we could actually look slightly at the dynamic of being a woman of color and a woman in general, there's a lot around the fact that within the STEM fields, there is still a very large absence of women, which is predominantly why we started this series in the first place, because we wanted to uplift women, give room for their journeys and share their stories. How do you assert yourself and your presence when you're in the room as a team leader? Because you have a certain level of responsibility, but being a woman and a woman of color, I can imagine that that's challenged at certain times. And on days where you feel less confident, how do you uplift yourself?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for me, honestly, I have generally just tried to not focus on the fact that women are color. So I have tried just to do what I can do in terms of my abilities and my experience. But I do think and agree that, especially in the industries we're in, that in terms of seniority, there isn't enough women. And not only that, I don't think there's enough ethnicity as well, both male and female. So, it's both basically, in my view. I do think it's getting a lot better. From my experience, like we've had a number of senior women join our areas, but again, the ethnicity side is still the bit that I think still needs to be worked on across our industry as a whole, not just specific. I think in terms of how I come across, it's been learning, and I think as I've grown and as I've done this job more and more, the confidence has really helped me. And I think that's one thing I would say to people is just believe that you deserve this position that you're in, and believe you know your role and you know what you're doing. And when you walk into a room and you feel like I've been in situations where not only have I been the only woman, but I've been the only person of color, and it's trying to kind of not focus too much on that and focus on yourself, and just do what you have to do to make you come across confident and know what you're talking about, because you do, because you've got where you are. And once you do that, people will listen to you, people will acknowledge you. And yes, it's taken me years sometimes, but it's just a journey, and it's just about learning about yourself, have the confidence, and use terminology that reflects yourself, rather than, oh, I think, have that, use the confident words like, this is what we need to be doing, not like, oh, maybe I think we should be doing this, I think we should be doing this. Have that assertiveness when you're trying to explain things or come across or put across your thoughts, etc. Days when I feel less confident, we all have those days. And I think when I have those days when I am feeling either less confident or a bit low, I literally just take a task at a time and just do what I need to do in that moment. I try not to think about other things outside of my job when I'm working, which sometimes is easier said than done. But again, the days that I feel less confident, I will give it my all, because, you know, as a team leader, you're leading by example. You know, you need to make sure at the end of the day, you have to do that job. You need to make sure your team's doing what they need to be doing. So do what you have to do. And where you have your down moments, take time away. Just try and de-stress. I try a lot of breathing exercises and yoga and meditation to kind of calm myself and, you know, bring back my confidence. But again, that's my personal growth. So people should just use their own tools that they know that can bring back that confidence and that assertiveness.
The great thing about what you were saying is a lot of the tools that you're implementing aren't just based on your career, but they also are veering towards developing you as a person, as a woman, as an individual.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually really like the fact that you spoke about the idea of not actually thinking of yourself as a woman or a woman of color, or however someone may choose to identify themselves. Instead, you are just a individual that is at work and you have something to bring to the table and you are going to assert that. And I think, I mean, I live by the ethos of fake it till you make it. So I think that's a really great way of doing that to a certain extent. I'm sure over the years of your experience, because you've had such a wonderful journey, you do also believe it. But even the days where you do feel less confident, I think that ideology will absolutely help carry you through. Because like you said, you have to be present and you have to be forthcoming because you are a team leader. So I think that's a really wonderful insight that you've shared with us. So thank you. I know that, as we've mentioned, that there are more and more women that are joining the industry and they are entering at managerial levels or building their way up. So for a woman who at the moment is maybe entering the field or aspiring to management level, what sort of advice would you give them? And how can they combat that general stigma that we have in the world and society that women aren't taken as seriously?
Yeah, it's a good question again. I think for me learning my role and being really confident about my role and what I need to be doing and my goals, etc., has been really key in terms of my journey and my development. I don't think you can blag your way through life, unfortunately. I know there's some people that do try. I think it's very easy to go for like roles where, you know, you'll go for the money and stuff, but actually you need to understand your capabilities as a person and just make sure that any role that you're going for is definitely the role for you. Because so many people I know that have joined roles and actually it's almost been a tick box for them rather than actually having that experience. So for me, I would say it's definitely in terms of the managerial side, just like understand your role, be clear with your direction, have the confidence that you know what you're doing. In terms of the stigma around women in business, it's a really difficult one because it's always going to be there. And, you know, unless you are somebody that can make that difference, you almost have to just try and focus on yourself and know your worth and take aside that, you know, you're a woman, have that confidence that, you know what, you are better than Joe Bloggs next to you when you're applying for that role. And we're never going to, you know, it's going to take years and years to move away from that stigma around women in business, etc. But I guess for me, like I've said earlier, I have tried really hard to just, I do see it, of course, I see it, but I've just tried to do what I can do within myself and within my powers and, you know, push at roles that I think I do deserve. And if I get it, I get it. If I don't, okay, it could be one or two other things, but just take a step back and just see, okay, what can I do? What else can I do to make myself that perfect candidate for that role, kind of thing.
Yeah, I agree. But I think also where you were talking about the fact that that stigma will always be there, I think we've seen so much change being cultivated. And I think you don't necessarily have to be a woman that is going to stand up and shout at the top of your lungs to create change. I think often people forget that change can be made in the most incredible way. Even, for instance, someone like you, of your caliber, your skill set, doing a job, and someone comes in to be interviewed to be a part of your team, they would see a woman of color, a woman of a senior level, and that in itself is inspiring, because as another woman you will feel like, okay, no, this is great, like there are other women here, like this is going to be okay.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that people have to acknowledge, that there's a learning curve, and you know, people can evolve, people can learn, people can be inspired even in situations where they're not being spoken to or spoken at or having campaigns thrown in front of them. So yes, I think you put that together really, really well. And why are you laughing? You don't think so?
I don't know, because I feel like I can cover more, but it's really difficult sometimes to get like the words out sometimes, like I don't know.
Because there's so much to be said.
There's so much. And a lot of it is out of our control, and unless we just push through and prove that, you know what, people like us, women, colored, you know, people of color, etc., you know, unless you just apply yourself and just keep pushing yourself, unless you can make a difference, that's fine. But if you can't, all you can do is just focus on you and focus on your journey and focus on that path, because everything else is out of your control. And that's kind of the ethos I've had in the last few years, kind of thing. Yes, I will raise where I need to raise. We have, you know, insight days, etc., people asking for our opinions and input, and I would always raise all these areas. But at the end of the day, it's always out of our control in any industry, in any bank. And all you can do is genuinely just focus on you, know your worth, and just push through for you.
Yeah, no, I do completely agree with you, because I think, like you said, the idea of not being taken seriously or whatever stigma there may be that we're trying to combat, I think there will always be a certain opinion. So sometimes the best way of acting against it is to actually just focus on yourself and let your work do the talking. So I agree completely. Moving on slightly, I know that we still see a lot of hardship faced towards women at the moment, being confined to roles that are of a certain level or more junior. They struggle with areas of promotion and so forth, and it is more prominent for people of color as well. How do you think that the financial world can create a more inclusive space that engages, supports, and promotes women at work?
Where I work for Santander, I've been fortunate enough to kind of have the space where I need to show my experience, show my leadership. I've had the opportunities of growth and promotion as well. So I've been quite fortunate. But I do think generally as institutions, we need to probably recognise women a lot more, recognise women of colour, recognise ethnicity as a whole as well a lot more, and kind of shout about where somebody has done a good job and demonstrated that they have been successful because of the work they've done. We need to probably recognise that a lot more in institutions as a whole.
Absolutely. And I think it's really telling of the fact that you've been working with Santander for so many years, because if you didn't feel that level of support and engagement and you didn't see those promotions, that would ultimately demotivate you. So I think it's really amazing that you're working in an organization that really supports that, and you haven't felt discriminated against because of your color, because of your gender. I think that's a really powerful and forward-thinking way of being. The idea of engaging with women, giving them the accolade that they deserve to motivate them and help them continue engaging with their work at a level, because everyone needs to feel motivated in the place of work.
Yeah.
But I also think, like we've already addressed early on, and I'm sure you can add more to it, about the fact that the financial world isn't necessarily an industry that requires an higher educational background.
Mhm.
And with that in mind, I think one of the best way to become a really inclusive space is opening schemes and programs and different methods to engage with young women in the community, because I think particularly at a young age, and I don't know about your experience, but of coming from an ethnic household, like an Asian household, it was always like focus on like the sciences and maths. But then it got to a certain point where eventually you got to a certain age and the focus would always be on something else. And then it would just be like, okay, just do a degree. And I think women naturally veer off of the interest of these subjects because they're not given the attention that our male counterparts are often given in these subject areas, even in younger years at school. So I think the financial world would become a more inclusive space if we started nurturing people of all ages.
Yeah.
So not just the women that exist in the workplace currently, but also how can we engage, support women in exploring the potential industry as a career choice for them down the line.
No, I completely agree with what exactly, and that is it. You know, you kind of hit the nail on the head there. I think you're right. I'm proof that education doesn't really matter. With certain fields, obviously, it is about experience and it's about working and really understanding the role and learning the role that you're in. And I think in terms of opportunities, I do agree, like reach out to even women who've had kids when they were younger and all of that sort of stuff. It's almost like give them the opportunities and schemes where they can come in trying to learn the basics and then work their way up like I've done, and yeah, I agree. Like you're right in terms of education is not the be all and end all. And I think sometimes we need to maybe send that message out as well and say, you know what, we are willing to give people a chance at the right levels. It might mean you might have to go to a more junior role to start off with, but as long as you apply yourself and you work your way through those stages and stuff, you can get where I am and become a team leader. And it might take a few years, but the reward and the journey on the back of it is actually really inspiring for me. Like for me, I look back and I just sometimes think, wow, you know what, I've been actually really fortunate in the opportunities that I've been given. And a lot of that is because of how hard I've worked.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree with that, because I think it doesn't help that with the industry, the perception is also that it can be quite a boring industry being in the world of finance. I mean, I'm sure you absolutely love what you do. I adore what I do. And I think also that's also a part of the engagement side of things, that people may have this certain perception, not only that they can't enter the field as a woman because the statistics show us that it is a more male driven environment, but also maybe it's not going to be as creative or as fun as other industries. But I mean, in my experience of being in the world of fintech, it's completely different. And I think a lot of the time there are women that are more inspired when there's a creative element. There are other women who are very pragmatic and deal very well with numbers and coding.
Yeah.
So I think showing that diversity of the industry
Mm-hmm.
would absolutely engage with women, and then they can have a successful career like you, where they've been able to be retained in one organization for years.
Yeah. And I think also the key for me, as well as that is your stakeholder management. I think networking is massive. I think speaking to the right people, understanding what other opportunities there are, and speaking to people that have the experience and gone through like different roles in terms of your journey as well. I'm a great believer of networking is key. Like I've had twice in my past roles areas that I probably wouldn't have even thought about looking at. People have approached me because of my networking, and when I've taken that role, it's been one of the right roles to take at that time, because it just allowed my knowledge to grow and grow and grow. And a lot of that was because of my networking, and I do believe that's really important. And those are the sort of things that we need to teach women, teach all our areas in terms of that connections and building connections and how important it is. It isn't just about your day-to-day job, it is about other aspects as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think networking is such a fundamental part of life now anyway. Not only just career, but passions, and it just filters into absolutely everything. So that's a really great example. Thank you. So sort of like diverting ever so slightly from the topic of women in work and female presence, the financial world, you've been in it for over a decade. So in your experience of the finance world, what are the risks that you think we will see an increase of in the world of finance? Because obviously that's your forte.
Yeah.
And how do you anticipate that they will evolve in the next 5 years or so?
Yeah. So, you know, given where we are currently, the biggest risks, I believe, are going to be climate change, obviously, making sure as financial institutions we're helping our businesses in terms of making the difference, doing what they need to do to meet all our worldwide targets, etc., that we've all been given. And I think financial institutions have the tools, and I'm hoping they will use the tools that they have to kind of help some of these businesses support, especially the smaller SMEs, and share knowledge. I believe knowledge is power, and I think we're kind of in the core where we've got so many areas that come into our field, come into our businesses wanting money, and it's almost sharing knowledge as well and say, oh, you know what, this company could kind of help you with this. If you're thinking about changing this to meet some of your requirements, you know, maybe this area can help. So it's kind of like cross-purposing, sharing knowledge and being that core support in terms of that. Other areas are also cybersecurity. I think where we are, the world we're living in, it's so much more easier for hackers, scamming, all of this sort of stuff. And as banks, I'm looking forward to that. Not looking forward to it, but I'm interested to see what more banks are doing in terms of that, especially supporting the more vulnerable in terms of cybersecurity. And finally, you know, cost of living. It's all happening right now. And again, trying to see actually what banks are trying to do to help people rather than increase costs, increase interest rates and all of that. I mean, a lot of it is obviously out of their power, but what support are we giving our customers?
No, thank you for that. Those are 3 really strong examples. I mean, cybersecurity is something we see more and more of every single day. The same with climate change, and as you've mentioned, we're literally living the cost of living crisis at the moment. I mean, cybersecurity is something that I find really interesting as well, because we're seeing evolution coming about where like hackers are getting smarter and they are finding ways to do such creative and realistic looking things. So I think that adaptation from banks and other financial institutions and alternative banks is going to be key, whether it's through AI or like anti-money laundering or whatever it may be. It will definitely be something to keep an eye on. So thank you.
Yeah.
So moving on quite nicely from that to our last question for today is, so what technologies are you excited to see from the world or from the world of fintech that are already or could in the future support traditional financial institutions like banks?
Yeah, I'm probably not as close to kind of fintech, so I'm probably not fully aware of what our capabilities are and, you know, how far we can go in terms of technology. But I think, as I've kind of touched on in the previous question, I think what are we doing as financial institutions to help support like the climate change and cybersecurity? What sort of systems and tools can we bring in to kind of support all of that? And kind of just with people, sometimes those sort of things can be the last thing that they think about, but actually it should be at the forefront. And it's understanding how we can help our customers and help the institutions and everyone really focus on this, because for me, climate change is a big thing. It's worrying. It's our summers are hotter, our winters are even colder, and it's only going to get worse. Our energy, the pollution, all of that sort of stuff. And as you've touched on it, cybersecurity is just becoming more and more kind of, the hackers are becoming more clever, and it's seeing what we can do in terms of supporting, well, helping stop that basically and kind of combat that, and what sort of technologies can we bring in. I guess, you know, we're coming into a world where like fingerprint, AI, all of that is becoming more and more. Pretty soon, maybe we don't even need our cards anymore. It's literally just everything's just gonna be fingerprint. So it'll be interesting to see how we evolve in that sort of sense as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like much like the previous question where you were talking about the fact that these risks are increasing, where fintechs and different technologies are bringing in these solutions of alternative verification or two-factor authentication, and just like blockchain technologies and things to sort of pick up on all these different risks and help mitigate them. It will help protect our traditional financial institutions like banks. So I think that's a really great answer. Thank you. So that pretty much summarizes our time together.
Amazing.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today because it's been really interesting and you've had an amazing pathway, and I'm sure it will continue prospering for many years to come. So I really do appreciate your time and your input and your just full transparency. It's been a pleasure.
No, that's good. Anytime. No, it's actually been quite nice just, you know, having to think about some of this sort of stuff and actually thinking about my journey and how far I've come as well. So, you know, thanks for letting me think about that as well, given what you've asked.
Of course. See, that's the thing. Sometimes we're so busy working, we haven't even realized how far we've come. So go you.
Yeah, exactly. And you.
Thank you.